Hi, and welcome to the SourceLife podcast. My name is Novu, and I am the product-led growth at Novu. Together with me, we have Emil, Novu's community manager. Stay with us as we unravel top founder decision to build their cost companies and the mistake and success they have achieved.
We have been talking to Tomer Barnea, the CEO and founder of Novu. Novu is the first open source notification infrastructure for developers. We had a really fascinating conversation about this motion called building in public. In today's world, open source companies, and actually there are many of them trying to be as transparent as possible with their communities. And Tomer shared his thoughts about the steps he had to make in order to really be a part of this motion of building in public. And he also elaborates on why you should do it as well or consider it. So it's actually from Novu's GitHub repositories till the Notion page, like make it public. Anywho, I hope you will enjoy it. So let's begin.
Okay, today we are with Tomer, the CEO and co-founder of Novu. Thank you for coming, Tomer.
Happy to be here, and congratulations on the new podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about Novu. Basically, Novu is the first infrastructure for developer for basically building notification in your application, any possible communication through SMSs, messages, in-app notification, push notification. And Novu is being built fully open source, and we are basically building in public. So, Tomer, can you tell me a little bit what is building in public, basically?
Yeah, building in public is something that is rather new. I mean, definitely some companies have been doing that for the past 10, 15 years, but as a motion, as an agenda, it seems to be something that is rather new. And, it's basically, it is just like it sounds. It means you as a company try to make sure whatever you can, whatever you feel comfortable, you should probably share with your community, share with your co-workers, with your, whomever is interested. It helps by making sure everyone kind of have the same context, everyone are in line of what you've been doing. And it gives, a tremendous amount of, I would say, confidence for the people around you that you kind of, you know what you're doing, you're transparent to them. So it gives a lot of approval from, potential customers and community members. But yeah, I mean, basically whatever you can, I believe you should try and make public.
So Tomer, if we're talking about building in public, what it really means building in public, like, okay, I declared myself, I'm building in public. Nice. But how it comes to life when you actually do it, what are you supposed to do?
It's funny you asking like that. There's, it's not really a book, but I would say it's a really big kind of articles assembly of the marketing, the CMO, who is also the co-founder of Intercom. And he's kind of referring to one of the biggest things that you should do is you should name everything, because once it's named, it becomes its own thing. So first of all, you need to announce you're going to build in public. Now, after you've done the announcement, what does that mean? It's vastly different, right? Some companies kind of gives like a daily or weekly updates about the numbers. Some are really, I would say, gutted numbers of, the nitty gritty, everything that's going on. Some are taking a more, I would say, in the gut or fully out there approach, which means they're going to give you the actual salaries. But in the end, it's your ability as a company to kind of share with your community, share with your colleagues, share with your employees, share with your investors, advisors, whoever is around you, share your internal numbers So in our particular case, that means sharing our handbook, our employee handbook, because what we believe is a lot of the actual issues we're facing, while they seems like there are very, unique issues, they're most definitely not. Those are very generic issues. And hopefully when we're kind of trying to resolve them, and as both of you know, really strong mentality of fail quickly, hopefully those insights and ideas are going to be, represented within the handbook, and then other people, other companies would be able to learn something from it. And that, we have the handbook that is out there. We have a lot of internal assets we're giving away. Obviously, all of our code is out there. We just try, KPIs, numbers. We just try to put everything out there. It actually boils down to the way we communicate internally. It makes sure a lot of our internal channels are actually not internal, they're external, and the community can see everything. It means we try to write everything down on Notion, so it would be then able to represent on our handbook. Basically, we just try to put everything written and as publicly available as we can.
But we also put a lot of code outside, and that code is not only just our library, right? We put everything outside exposed to everybody. Like we take our library, right. Of course, it's because it's an open source library, but you go to our main website, it's also publicly available for everybody. Right. And you go also to our CMS, and it's also publicly available for everybody.
I think for me, for us, it's kind of, you just need to ask the right question. I think mostly when you're working at a company and transparency, or, maybe we're kind of taking transparency to the max, but I'd say usually you need to ask the question, working on most companies, on whether or not you'd like to share it, right? In our case, it's kind of the opposite, right? Because our question is, should we hide it? And most often than not, I'm trying, and it's like not a daily, but I would say a minimum a weekly conversation of something being asked on, should we put that on our internal channels? And I'm usually trying to find a reason on why we shouldn't. Because at the end of the day, when you're trying to build with the community and you're trying to build with other people, it becomes vastly harder for them to be part of what you're doing if they're lacking the context, if they're lacking the information. And so when something is public, you can just read. It doesn't usually mean you're going to read because we have the time, but it gives the ability for someone who's kind of, willing to join. And we have our very own David, who joined from the open source community, and he did the full engineering onboarding in what I'm going to assume was just under 4 hours. So yeah, a lot of it comes to David, but definitely a lot of it comes to the fact that he was already an open source contributor. He already knew what we were doing. He was already part of our Discord channels, and he saw the handbook, and he basically knew most of the things he needed to prior to actually joining the company. And just one small win we're getting from sharing everything out there.
And we basically did a lot of sins because we did some stuff that were private, but we fixed it over time, right? For example, we have our own internal team for Novu, but we also have our contributors. First, we had a lot of conversation only with our internal team, but we felt like that doesn't mean like building in public, right? So we moved our engineering channel from the private team into public, right? Probably Emil has some stuff to tell us about it.
Initially, our engineering team and the engineering discussions, like the public channel, was separated, which seemed at first kind of essential and kind of normal. But Tomer was just pushing from from the beginning almost, that most of the discussions that happens on the engineering team in the internal channel should be discussed over the public channel. And he just was like, just move it there. I mean, guys, you should talk about it in public, and you should just share about what you're doing and share about your obstacles and your problems and the things that you're working on a daily basis. So it was really hard to do because, well, you just never know when something should be discussed in public and when something is more appropriate to be discussed like internally. And of course, we got still different issues, but this is like, it's not the case. The case is that we actually eventually decided to merge those two channels and basically move all the communication around the engineering things over the tasks that like the team's daily tasks that they're working on and every other open issue over GitHub or anything that the community is working on. This is something that now is available and discussed in public, and that's where we are going with it.
So basically, you're right. And we also have a lot of stuff that we share, right? We have our numbers of actually how many users we have. We have our amount of Discord users, the amount of tweets we are doing, our whole strategy. And we come out and tell people what we are doing. But it can be kind of risky, you don't think? Like people will say, okay, they're making nonsense or stuff like that. What the hell are they doing?
I'd actually, prior going into the whole risk thing, looking into the whole transparency motion and the whole building in public motion, you need to kind of figure out why companies are doing that and why we in particular decided to do that. Emil just mentioned, when we started, and it was just basically Dima, myself, and Gali and Gosha, first engineers, we actually had our very own Slack channel for internal communication, and then another one for the Discord for the community one. It became quite apparent really easily that, that's not going to work. Basically, people are, at the end of the day, there is the ease of logistics. Because at the end of the day, if most of your team is on Slack and you found something cool or you have something to share on the PR, whatever that may be, you're going to share it where it's going to be more easy to do. Because you're not going to think about, should I share it, should I not, every single time you need to post something, every single time you need to talk about something, every single time you need to share, think in public or, whatever. So the default solution should be, I would say, the right one based on your company's values. And so realizing that, we basically deleted the Slack and moved everything into Discord. And as Emil mentioned, we and Novu, it's still an ongoing process of us basically trying to move everything that we can to be public. Being a business, obviously there are some stuff we can't or we choose not to, like our employee salaries and some of our internal works, some of our timelines or scheduling. But mostly, everything is out there. And if you want to see it, you can just go on to the handbook. The reason we kind of do that is because specifically for an open source company, I think if you're not going to do that, you're basically not in the correct context of what you've been doing for your community. And some of them are users, some of them are contributors or collaborators. And if they're lacking the actual context, they can be part of it. Right? We just had in our all hands an issue where we realized even with all of that, we're lacking and the community are struggling to contribute to more the in-depth kind of tickets. Specifically today was one of a big ticket about some design problems we have. But we're struggling to kind of make sure the correct context is being passed over to the community to be able to actually take part. And so I think just on the communication side, we're going to invest a lot more on making sure it's out there.
I remember when we have our own Notion, basically, and it was totally private. Then you come out with this project called Project Glasswing, that we are going to take the entire Notion and make it public. And I remember the first responses from a lot of people from the team, like, what? how can you do this? There's so much stuff there. Like every possible meeting that we are doing, every possible, I don't know, our advisor, our investors,
Right.
private information. But you insisted on that. And I think this is very admirable because, most company will not expose this kind of numbers, even though they can say that they are building in public. They will not expose this kind of stuff. They will expose the code. They will expose all their repository, some of their new idea. But this is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I remember the kind of the responses I got from, what do you mean we're going to share the Notion? No, yeah, obviously we had to kind of find the sweet spot because you can't share something that is, private information with someone. So as you mentioned, our investors and advisors, personal details are sitting there, and obviously we can share that. And any one of us is kind of having a private meeting with someone, and we document and keep notes for our own use. We can go out and share it. It's not only it's frowned upon. The fact that we as a company decide to share everything, that's fine. It does not uphold the same standard or even remotely kind of make it logically okay to share a private meeting. So we're still, obviously there's some meeting and stuff like that out that we keep to ourselves. But I mean, right now you can go to the handbook and see whatever we're going to offer to our employees in their home offices. Why? I don't know. I mean, I'm only going to assume that there are other fully remote companies out there, and they kind of struggling with the question, well, you know what? We're not going to pay for offices, so how are we going to help our employees working from home? And hopefully one would be able to take what we built there and enjoy.
We are, and how strong we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely right. And I think even before talking about developers, I would say that there is a lot of misconceptions about what's perceived as being powerful. Say you're amazing and awesome does not make you powerful. It makes you self-claim powerful, which is vastly different. And I think, yeah, there is some power into controlling the narrative and kind of saying, you know what, we're amazing. We never make mistakes. But I've been doing the whole entrepreneurship thing for a couple of years now. And the only thing I can say for sure is I know nothing about what I'm doing. And I'm just putting my emphasis on learning every single day, every single week, learning something new. And when you kind of try and put a lot of emphasis on how great you are, usually in order to do so, you kind of, you sweep under the rug all the bad stuff because it stops you with feeling that powerful and that amazing. Obviously, it does not mean everyone's like it. This is very much, a me thing. And when I kind of trying to empower myself really hard, I kind of, there was no issues there. So when you kind of take everything as a whole, good and bad, you're able to tackle head on, the issues you have. And as long as we keep on learning quickly from those, there isn't really anything someone can do. And right now, every single one of our competitors can see, and you know what, and they can have this internal conversation of them saying, you know what, I didn't believe they're doing that way, or we doing it that way. Sure, go ahead. I mean, that's how we do it. You have a lot of context on how we do and why we do. You probably don't have everything. You don't have everything that we thought of and why we did it. It's fine. I mean, hopefully they'll be able to use our learning and follow.
This is very common now for almost every open source company to actually developing and doing everything in public. But what would happen if I guess we can just give our thoughts about it, but what would happen if we didn't build in public? What would happen if we just build everything privately? Like, how do you think that would affect us, our contributors, how people are looking at the company?
It's hard to say. It's a good question because at the end of the day, it boils down to asking, you know what, we're putting that amount of effort into becoming public. What would happen if we'll reserve all of those resources to something else, right? It's a simple question. I think looking from the ROI perspective on this type is going to be hard because a lot of it comes from values. A lot of it comes from, yes, understanding the engineering mindset. I think, I value transparency very much. And you all know that working with me. I value transparency because I think gives everyone the ability to be owners to their mistakes and realizing making mistakes is not that bad. It's part of growing, it's part of learning. And it's something that as an engineer, I know for a fact we value because when an engineers try to be too much of fluff, I know that, they are going to hit the wall really quickly. Because at the end of the day, most engineers are going to tackle them with the first question they need on a technological level, and that's not going to fly anymore. And so engineers are being faced with the issues or with the opportunities to kind of tackle that. I would say transparency, I would say it's more of an authenticity type of answer, but yeah, transparency basically. And when you're basically saying everything as it is, it becomes much more easy to relate. It becomes much more easy to know. And I think that's one of the reasons why open source is that big, because when I want to implement something, I kind of want to know what's under the hood. Even if I'm not going to do anything about it right now, I kind of want to know there's nothing peculiar out there. They're not using anything I wouldn't want to use, or maybe I think I have some previous relevant experience, and I'd like to give that. Again, it's really hard to answer why we would be extremely private, but I'm going to assume we're going to face much more issues about what's going to be open source or not, because again, the whole company vibe would be, that should be internal. So when everything is kind of out there, no one is actually asking the question, maybe this code should be private. No, why? I mean, everything is out there. Why shouldn't that be?
Basically, if you had to start again from the start, with all the mistakes that you have done so far, I guess we didn't start fully publicly, or maybe we still have some things that we are dragging from the past that are still private. What would you change when you just start?
Interesting question. So, the company actually didn't start as an open source company. We kind of pivoted into that. We started as a kind of a more product-oriented company. I can tell you this crazy story about how I would love to start as an open source company, but, life is life, and basically I had to learn that, so I'm happy about that. The one thing I can definitely say is when we were raising the funds and just afterwards, we were really into a lot of the business things that, are part of building a business. And there were a couple of 2 months there where we were kind of too quiet. We didn't share progress. We didn't share the community. So I would say that's definitely a big thing I would change. And I'm trying to make sure we are putting much more updates and inputs and insights and whatever we can, because at the end of the day, our journey, while being unique, is not that unique. That's life. A lot of people did something that is, if not the same, is similar to what we're doing. And I'd love for us to be able to lead them through our insights and thoughts, because hopefully they would be able to make one less mistakes that we did. And they're going to make their own mistakes, a new one. And hopefully learning from us and our approach, they're going to take the path of transparency and sharing whatever they can. Main thing is share more.
So, I think our millions of listeners now, I would probably like to know, they are now sitting at home and they're thinking, okay, we heard this nice podcast, but what do we actually need to do? So I think if you have to take some steps into things that you should do, you probably need to, people think, okay, we're building in public. What should we? So it's probably, except for the code, because you should write the code that is open for everybody. It's not only your open source library, it's all your other library. It's your discussion over GitHub. Like, you don't just write a feature because you decided, because you're the product. No, you go to discussion, you open it, you see what other people are saying, their thoughts and everything.
I would look at the vast difference between being and both companies are amazing, right? It's just a different approach between being, I would say, GitLab and then SendGrid, right? GitLab are owning the whole open source motion. Everything is out there, code, license, handbook, blogs, whatever. And then SendGrid, while being a great company, and they are, if you try and see what actually is public out there, I mean, yes, some blogging, that's nice. And then other than that, SDKs. Now, SDKs, while being very helpful, are definitely not core engineering value, which means I'm as an engineer do not value the engineering going on there. So there's no better connection for me with the company due to the fact it's open source. The only thing it does give me, it gives me the ability to kind of update the SDK when I need because something was broken, but not other than that. So I think if you and you haven't really mentioned that, but I'm going to assume if you are an open source founder or an open source creator, I would say take a look and ask, if you can share more, if you can put your full product out there, if you can put your concept and design ideas and even your tickets out there so the community will be able to help you, the collaborators or contributors will be able to kind of donate code or make a vivid discussion about what they did in the previous workspace. Those could help you learn quite a bit and with not that much of extra efforts.
Basically, I really like the fact that we are really building in public. I like the comparison between GitLab and SendGrid, and we can take a lot of other companies that they are building SDK instead of open source. I think except for that, we had a lot of things we change if somebody here is listening. So here is the things that we have done so far. So basically, we're trying to be very open with our developers. So when we just writing questions between our team even, we write them in public everywhere. So other people can listen to the conversation and even go on a phone call with us, a video call if they have any problem. We shared our Notion. We put almost everything public so people can see. We always try to share with everybody in the community what's going on. And we never almost take a decision without talking to the community. Thank you very much, Tom. I think this was super insightful. And I think it's also very helpful for all the other founders and co-founders that are listening to this podcast and they want to build their own open source company. And any last words that you want to tell those founders, entrepreneurs, indie hackers?
Indie hackers. No, I think, first of all, it was a pleasure. And I think, being a founder is a really demanding job. So I have fun with it. Secondly, and more to the point about transparency, I value transparency as a person. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's part of the company culture and it's part of the company's values. Obviously, it's not just that, but it is part of it. And I would definitely say that I see a lot of, I would say, small wins being a transparent company. And I would definitely say that if you're an open source company, it's something you should definitely, at a minimum, take a look at and see how you can incorporate that into the business. Right now, we're giving a lot of transparency or a lot of resources available that maybe, the handbook. We just released our pitch deck the other day. Obviously, the numbers you're sharing. And right now, I'm actually working on a really cool thing right now, which is sharing our business model, not the actual numbers, but it's the model. So I would definitely encourage you to see if you can be an open source, transparent company.
So everybody that listen right now, go check out our handbook so you can really learn how we did it, what you should do. Look at our discussion over GitHub. Come join our Discord channel and see how we take a private conversation public. And come and learn, always learn. So thank you very much, Tomer and Emil.
Thank you.
And we will meet again.
Definitely.